My name's Rebecca Ebel. I'm excited to welcome everyone here today. We're here with Heather Jones and Taymour Grahne on the occasion of Heather's exhibition, Black Rock and Beyond, at Contemporary Art Matters, Columbus, Ohio, June 2020. I had the privilege of meeting Heather at a talk with Kahinda Wiley and Swizz Beats in Miami Beach last year during Art Basel. And through the beauty of Instagram, got to know her work and learned more about her experience at Black Rock in Dakar. And when we talked about working together and showing her work here and doing a Zoom meeting, the first person I thought of was Taymour. Taymour, I'm excited to have started hanging out with. He's my Art World posse. I met Taymour in Los Angeles at the Frieze Art Fair with Pete Scantlin, a collector we work with who's just got an amazing collection, and Taymour has introduced him to so many fabulous young artists. So Taymour and I were showing images of Heather's work on our phones. Taymour is an independent art advisor, curator, dealer in London. He did have a gallery in New York for many years, launched the career of a number of amazing emerging and mid-career artists. Heather is from Cincinnati, Ohio. She got her BA and MFA in art history at the University of Cincinnati and has been making textile work, exploring cultural histories through textile. So I'll let the artistic conversation begin and hand the mic over to Taymour and let you lead the conversation.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that nice introduction, and super excited to have gotten to know Heather's work through you, Rebecca. You know, as Rebecca was saying, we kind of first started talking about your work back in February, if not before, and she kind of introduced me to the work, and I kind of liked it from the start and was super intrigued from the start. And, you know, seeing her work in person was also super great. But maybe as a starting point, Heather, you can tell us a bit about your background, kind of, you know, where you grew up, where you went to school, and kind of your original influences and interests.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, went to school there, and I have always been interested in quilts. So back in high school, I would, even before I was making anything with textiles, I would start to buy quilts from antique stores, from flea markets where I could find them. I was drawn to them as both visual objects, I would say, so like the colors and shapes, but also, and maybe more importantly, as historical items that, you know, I would think of the women who made them, and this is their remnants, this is what we have from them. So there was this connection to me between these women who made these works, between these people in the past who were from the same area where I grew up in, you know, southwestern Ohio. My family is from Kentucky and Ohio. So quilting as a whole is a very popular thing that has happened in this area of the country. So I was drawn to those, you know, from an early age, and that I think is what has sort of led me to where I am now.
And you were saying kind of, has it run in your family, or do you have any people that have worked with quilts? Is it across generations, or is it more specific to one member of your family?
Yeah, so in my family in particular, I had one person who made a quilt. That was my great aunt. Her name was Ollie. She was born in 1897 in Eastern Kentucky.
Wow.
And so she came up with her family from, you know, kind of Eastern Kentucky rural area to the north in Ohio for jobs. You know, in the 20s and 30s, there were lots of factories that people could get work at. So she moved with her family up to sort of near where I live today. And so when I was born in 1976, she was in her 80s and she made me a quilt. So, and I still have it. So it's this kind of tattered object now, but I still have it. And, you know, as I have gotten older, to me, the fact that this woman made this for me, just some baby in the family, as it was a, you know, a tradition to do, really has made a mark on, I think, you know, my practice in general.
And when did you kind of, I mean, I guess it started with you, you know, working with fabrics and putting, you know, quilting away. When did you decide to kind of take it as a full-time kind of, you know, contemporary art, fine art career path?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working with textiles probably for the past 10 or 11 years. And I started making quilts after my kids were born. I, you know, didn't make quilts for a long time. It wasn't until I had children of my own that I made them. I had been inspired by quilts, especially the quilt makers of Gee's Bend, the women who lived in Alabama, and I had seen their work. So I was collecting these quilts, and then I was able to view these types of work in the museum in Cleveland, Ohio. The exhibit came back in 2002. But it wasn't until I had kids of my own that I began to make works that weren't, you know, in paint. So I started working with textiles then. And then there came a shift probably around 4 or 5 years ago. So I had made quilts at that point. I wrote a book on quilt making that was published with Abram.
Oh, wow.
But I wanted to make paintings like I was making quilts. And so I was experimenting with different types of paint material to figure out the best way to do that. And I wasn't happy with the end result. So I decided to work with textile in a different way and sort of approach them as objects on their own, not utilitarian objects, but something that should be hung on a wall as such.
And was there, you know, in the past, there was always, I guess, you know, I think craft making or artwork that is based off of craft and textile that was kind of historically seen as a decorative has now kind of really morphed into, you know, the world of, you know, contemporary fine art. We see, you know, craft textile works at Basel. We see them at all the, you know, greatest contemporary art museums.
Right.
When did you kind of see that shift, and do you view your work, was it better for your work that there's this kind of broader engagement in, you know, in textile and fabric and craft based practices?
Yeah, and I think one thing that's important to me too is the fact, I mean, I could make these in paint, but I choose to make them in textile. And I'm really interested in the fact that, you know, historically textiles are associated with women and the domestic. So that whole realm of, you know, to me, it's a feminist act to work with textiles because I'm able, and I'm specifically choosing these materials that have this tradition of domestic issues. You know, we are enwrapped in clothing every day and textiles, and it's kind of our second skin, but to use them in such a way that they are hung as fine art to me is important. And it's really sort of a hallmark of, or the reason why I do what I do.
Some of the kind of the source material for the print, the designs themselves.
So the work in the show here, a lot of this textile, the printed textiles I purchased when I was in Dakar in Senegal in Western Africa in October. I was there as a resident at Kehinde Wiley's Black Rock, Senegal. I spent the month of October there creating a body of work. So that's where all of the printed fabric came from.
And how was that experience at Black Rock? I guess it was, how many people were you? How many artists? And
So there are 3 at a time. There are a total of 15 this first year. So this was the inaugural year of the residency, and I was there in October. So I was one of the first people there. And so I was there with 2 other artists. I was there with a performance artist from Brazil and a photographer from Nigeria.
And so now all the works at Contemporary Art Matters were works that you made either during kind of Black Rock or immediately after, I guess.
Yeah, the exception of one piece that was made before, but yeah, everything else was either started there or as a result of my time there.
And then the previous body of work before you kind of got into these textiles, was your work? Did it take a lot from African textiles specifically, or was that a more recent?
No, that's a more recent
That's
thing.
more recent.
Yeah, I was in Morocco in February of last year, and I was really interested in, and I was able to witness the uh, culture of hand weaving rugs there.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I was really excited to, be a part of that and to see that history that, dates back hundreds of years there. And so that was one reason why I wanted to go to Dakar, was to explore that history, their history of textiles, and how those, handmade objects, how they've changed over time. And one thing I found in Dakar was that the men do the weaving, which was
Oh,
totally
really?
different. Yeah, in Dakar, the men are the weavers, so which was totally different than it was in Morocco.
So Morocco was kind of like your entry point to seeing what was happening on the continent in terms of, every time I go, I mean, Morocco's an amazing place. Every time I go, it's everything is done by hand, from the walls to the glass. It's such people are so good with kind of making things. It's such a maker's place. And what's the history in the US of kind of weaving? Is it region specific? Is it, was it big in one part of the US or?
I think, it varies from place to place. I think as a whole, though, I think what can be said is that it's not happening as much as it had been. We're one of those cultures, I think, that the handmade thing is not necessarily a part of everyday life, as it is in cultures like Morocco and cultures like in Senegal as well.
And what's the process like in kind of making these works or putting them together? How do you begin? And is there some sort of sketch, beforehand that goes into it? Do you plan the patterns and the materials before? What's the process like?
Yeah, I do a sketchbook. I work in there sometimes to draw out ideas. So in my studio space, I have a big wall that is covered in flannel. It's just cotton flannel that you might have sheets made out of, in the winter when it's cold. So the cotton I use, or the fabric I use, is cotton, and it's woven and it sticks to the flannel. So what I'll do is I'll take scissors, cut up areas of fabric, cut up pieces of fabric, shapes, colors, whatnot, and then sort of using the technique of collage, in essence, where I can place fabric on a wall and lay out compositions and designs. And then once I'm happy with the composition, I can sew it together with a sewing machine. So I'm using a lot of techniques that are, used in sort of craft-based techniques, but applying them in a different way.
And the patterns, are they kind of, I know you have there's a certain geometry to the work.
Yeah.
Is it always the case with your work? Is there always kind of this geometric element in
Typically, yeah. I mean, typically there's a lot of geometric. There's a lot of, some organic shapes that happen too. One thing that I love is, as the pieces are constructed, and I'm happy with the composition, then when I'm done, I stretch them over a wooden panel, like the one you have. And so as that fabric is pulled taut and stapled into place, some lines start to shift. So even though there is some areas of, rigid geographic shapes, there are also areas of some curved lines that happen.
And I was just on the website, and I know Rebecca also gave me a bit of a brief tour of the show. But I love the show. I think it's an amazing show. And there's one kind of, for me, really interesting outlier. It's that kind of, I think it's a diptych, that really colorful large piece.
Yeah.
Was that kind of like the anomaly versus the rest, or how did that piece come about?
So that one was inspired by my time in Morocco. I think just the colors that were so prevalent there during my stay, the blue skies, the corals of the architecture. So that's where, that really the design of that piece came to be from.
Cool. So how is the lockdown, your practice is so, oriented around, I guess the idea of domesticity and kind of that intense focus in quilting. Has being forced to being at home constantly, has it changed your studio practice, or are you still kind of going away and working at this time?
Yeah, I have a small studio at home, and then I have a studio outside of the house about 20 miles or so away. So it's, it's a bit of a drive to get there. And so during the beginnings of the pandemic, I wasn't going there much at all. So I hadn't been working at home lately. So I had to sort of reopen my studio at home, get everything set up. And I've been doing most of my work at my home studio. So I'm working on a smaller scale. So I'm still making pieces, but smaller in nature, just due to the space constraint. Now that things are loosening up a bit, I'm starting to go to the studio a couple times a week. So I'm getting back into the swing of things, and going to the other studio as well.
And for upcoming anything, I mean, COVID has kind of stopped everything, but anything coming up on the horizon in terms of upcoming exhibitions? Or I know you just opened or are in the process of opening this one.
I've got this exhibition that opens tomorrow here at Contemporary Art Matters in Columbus. And then next month in July, I've got an exhibit at the George Gallery in Charleston, South Carolina. Well, I'll have my work on display as well.
And are you going to continue this series, or is that kind of going to become a new series?
No, certainly continue this series. I'm interested in, just even revisiting the photos. I took a ton of photos when I was in Dakar. So just even revisiting that type of documentation as sort of jumping off points of inspiration. I'm really interested in continuing in my work.
And you brought up something interesting about photos. Do you document when you travel? Do you take photos of all these kind of patterns and forms and textiles? And then do you go back to the studio and look through the photographs? Is that
Yeah, and the especially the pattern fabric that I bought in Dakar, oftentimes it's used for garments. So that was one of my favorite things was driving around in Dakar, and looking out the windows and just watching people. And Dakar is really dusty. It's a really sort of dusty location there on the coast. So, but people would be dressed from head to toe in these fabulous prints. And so I was really intrigued, knowing full and well that they're going to be covered in dust by the end of the day. But there was something really beautiful about the fact that these garments were worn by people in their everyday lives. So that little element of incorporating, that bit of culture into my own work is something I'm really excited to even do more of.
And going to those kind of fabric stores or fabric markets must be an incredible experience, and kind of just being surrounded in a world of, color, design, textiles. Those must have been so cool to go to.
Yeah, because I didn't, I'd never been there before, so I didn't know quite what to expect. I brought things to work from home with, I brought fabric of my own, but I didn't quite know what I would see when I got there. So yeah, it was really interesting, and it was quite a challenge to figure out, because like you said, these markets were just full of fabric. And so then it was the question, like, what do you choose? Like, how do you choose? And then once chosen, how do I incorporate that into a body of work that I've been working on, for a couple of years now? How can I make that transition where I'm showing works and using material influenced by one culture, that of West Africa, and then how do I combine that with fabrics from my own American experience? How can I blend the two?
And so would you say these are, I mean, I know most of them were based from kind of West African textiles. Yeah. Was there also a blending of your kind of stuff in the US and textiles in the US in these works?
Yeah, in fact, I think all the pieces in the show are a combination of the West African textiles and then the American, the textiles that are available in America. They're certainly not produced.
Okay, cool.
But they are what is readily available here. So yeah, all of the work is a combination of these cultures, these cultural identities, and how that's sort of been my challenge, is how do I combine the two?
And how did the BlackRock residency come to be? Is it an application process, or do you get selected by someone or by a group?
Yeah, it was an application process. So I submitted my proposal, and then I was really excited to have my work in front of people who were on the jurying panel. So Thelma Golden from the Studio Museum in Harlem was part of that. Artist Carrie Mae Weems and Micheline Thomas were part of that decision, and then Kehinde Wiley himself, whom I'm a big fan of, and I've been a big fan of his work for a number of years. So to have the opportunity for my work and my ideas to be in front of them, but also not just in front of them, but also then supported by being selected was, you know, an incredible honor to me.
And are there other kind of textile-based artists who we should watch out for, who we should look towards, that you kind of admire, either both in a contemporary setting or in a historic setting?
I think, I mean, personally, one of my favorites is Annie Albers, who was the wife of Joseph Miller. She was, you know, primarily a textile worker, although she did some printmaking too, but she is one of the, you know, one of my idols, I would say.
Amazing. Well, it was a really nice discussion.
It was a great honor to speak with you. I'm really glad you were able to see the work in person.
Before we hang up, so the gallery is in downtown Columbus, and beyond living in a time of COVID opening up, we're not complete isolation anymore, but we've also, after the death of George Floyd, have had daily protests downtown Columbus. So the bars and restaurants down the street are all boarded up. Our building is not boarded up, and we are not experiencing any violence, but the protests are really part of a daily life here. I don't know if they're continuing in London, Taymour, but I know it was an international phenomenon. And I just wondered how, I know that, Heather, you've participated in some of the marches. Has it changed the way you think about your work in this American history?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it has. I mean, it really, I think, you know, growing up in Cincinnati, where Cincinnati, for those of you who are not familiar with the geography, is the southernmost part of the state. And across the river is Kentucky, which was a slaveholding state. And so I think I have, just growing up in that location, I've always been aware that there is this history that is not that far back. And so I think we are in this incredible time where we are, as a country, as a nation, that we need to recognize the role of African Americans in our culture. I think also just the fact that I was in West Africa, where a lot of the slave trade originated from, really had an effect on me personally, in the fact that, you know, this was not just this idea that I had read about, but this is something that really happened. And to be, you know, transplanted in that space for a month was really, you know, it had a really profound effect on me, I think, and my practice as well. So I think that is something that, you know, I think will show up in my work from here on out.
I just wanted to kind of, as a final note, saying, you know, I can't wait to get to know and see more of your work in depth. And I wish the show looks so good. I wish I could be there and view it in person, but I'll check out the install shots. But for those that haven't seen the work, I definitely recommend checking them out in person as well, because they're incredible.
Thank you very much.